ground now. Get on your face. Get down on your face now. Put your hands behind your back. Is there anybody else that you came up here in the store with you?
So cops had the wrong person and terrified this woman and her little 4-year-old son who was crying in the back seat. And then it's alleged they doubled down and continued to violate her rights even after realizing it was the wrong person.
Good police work, Officer Nancy.
You may remember this case broke back in November-ish of last year. I have a little bit of a status update of sorts and some additional commentary at the end. Here's a recap of what happened. It looks like the cops were looking for a 2013 white Lincoln MKZ, and the woman here had a white 2009 MKS. A quick Google search shows the differences on how those cars look. To detain someone, generally, police need reasonable, articulable suspicion that they're involved in criminal activity. This has to be more than a hunch and is based on the totality of the circumstances. The complaint in the lawsuit alleges that the police reports and dispatch logs indicated that the cops had absolutely no idea who they were looking for. Quote, at all times related to this case, the defendants knew for a fact that they were not looking for this particular white woman. They were told by dispatch that they were looking for an unknown individual, the suit claimed. The defendants got the wrong car and the wrong suspect. They all immediately knew those facts. It's also alleged that the cops eventually determined that the vehicle's VIN, the vehicle identification number, was not a match for the vehicle they were actually looking for. The complaint in the lawsuit claims the woman was then freed from handcuffs, but instead of being let go or allowed to comfort her crying little 4-year-old son, she was ordered to retrieve her license so the troopers could perform a warrant check. I don't see any emergency lights on, and it looks like that cop failed to use his turn signal at least twice. Just saying. This was around 7 a.m., and this woman was just going about her day. Then out of nowhere, as she's probably still waking up and getting ready for the day, cops show up. Multiple cops with massive guns, and they start yelling commands at her. If this woman slipped or did something by mistake, she could easily not be alive right now, and her son could have been caught in the crossfire, and instead of just crying and being traumatized, he too, instead, could not be alive.
Go ground now. Get on your face. Get down on your face now. Put your hands behind your back. Is there anybody else that you came up here in the store with you? Hey, what else? Hey, let's make sure nobody showed up with her. Hey, did anybody else get that car with her come inside? I need to know, like, I'm not playing. Did anybody else come in this this little boy knows her name? Okay.
Who knows what other information the cops had, if any, about the suspect they were looking for? But it seems very likely the cops didn't even have reasonable articulable suspicion to detain this woman or ask for ID, let alone legal justification to hold her at gunpoint. But even if they did have the proper legal justification to detain this woman at the beginning, reasonable suspicion can dissipate. Once they realized it was the wrong car, they were not entitled to her ID, unless they had some other legal justification that I'm unaware of. But cops are addicted to IDs. So, if the allegations are true, then you terrified this woman and her child, and you act like a complete ass because you need a fix. You're jonesing for your ID check. Maybe the cops will argue it was voluntary and they simply asked voluntarily for an ID. I don't know, I can't really make out the audio, but even if it was asked quote-unquote voluntarily, I would argue voluntary consent was close to impossible because this woman was terrified. She was just held at gunpoint by multiple men with rifles and put in handcuffs. I would argue there couldn't possibly be any meaningful voluntary ID giving. But on the other end of things, it's also possible it wasn't voluntary and the cops just simply demanded it. Not sure exactly how this played out, but any way you slice it, it doesn't look good. And even if, for the sake of argument, the cops were somehow entitled to the ID, there's a difference between what you can do and what you should do. Have some common sense and humanity. It's just adding insult to injury, or in this case, more injury to previous injury. If the allegations in the complaint are true, then I would argue that these cops potentially committed crimes like assault, battery, false imprisonment, kidnapping, as well as potentially others. Lawsuits are not enough. Police need to be charged criminally when appropriate. And if the woman slipped or moved the wrong way, she could easily not be alive anymore, and then we'd be talking about a wrongful death lawsuit and much more serious criminal charges. I'm not sure what the actual person they were looking for here was suspected of doing that was illegal, but it's hard for me to imagine that that person's alleged actions were worse or more dangerous than the cops here. And some of these cops may have just been following orders, but in my opinion, common sense dictates that they should confirm things for themselves, not just blindly follow other cops who say, yeah, this is the right suspect. Because as shown in this case, cops are not always correct or legally justified. And maybe it's possible in this case they all knew the same information and yet they still did this. Let's see how this lawsuit plays out. So here's a status update on the lawsuit that I could find. It looks like, no surprise, it's still dragging on as of January of this year, and the lawsuit was initially filed in October of last year. I'm showing this to demonstrate the point that these lawsuits take forever. Trying to get justice takes forever. But what didn't take forever was these cops violating this woman's rights. That took no time at all for them to do. And on the street, they have all the power, so it's almost this de facto might makes right, because there's nothing you can do about it in the short run at that moment because they overpower you. They have all the guns, they have all the people. Also, here are the troopers that were named as defendants in this lawsuit. The last update I saw on their employment status was from many months ago, so I don't know if they're still employed with the Arkansas State Police right now. I couldn't find an update. I couldn't find anything on their website. But if covering these kinds of cases has taught me anything, it's that most likely what has happened with them is either nothing or some sort of slap on the wrist. Or if they do end up getting fired, then they'll probably just be allowed to be employed by another police department in some other part of the country. The saying goes, justice delayed is justice denied. Let's see what ends up happening with this case. There probably won't be a huge update for a long time. Who knows? Let's wait and see. Imagine if non-cops, just normal citizens, went up to someone without legal justification and held them at gunpoint like this. They would be arrested immediately. But when cops do the same thing, its severity gets diminished because we look at it as something they normally are allowed to do and it was just a mistake on the job, so it's different than a normal person type of situation. But I would argue it's actually worse when cops do this sort of thing because they are doing it under the color of law, with a badge and a gun to back them up. It makes the situation more egregious and more terrifying. And what could this woman have done to prevent this? Literally nothing. And that should scare you. The next time something like this happens, it could be you, and next time it might not end how this one did. Here's what needs to be done moving forward. There needs to be better psychological screening for cops because more training can't fix everyone. There also needs to be individualized liability insurance required for cops, so bad cops can't get insurance, so they can't be cops at all. Or their premiums are going to be so high that it makes being a cop untenable. You'll have the market help in keeping bad cops out of law enforcement, and then taxpayers won't be as directly on the hook for lawsuits in the same way. There also needs to be criminal charges pursued when appropriate, as well as getting rid of police unions that protect bad cops, because unions by definition are there for their members, not for the taxpayers, not for us. I'd be fine with using our limited resources and money to hire less cops, but give them better screening and better training. Only hire people who have a desire and passion for protecting people's rights, and who actually know the law. Use our money to focus on quality instead of quantity.